John, can you go over the governor's executive order in regards to virtual meetings?
Sure. In response to the governor's executive order for conducting virtual meetings, this meeting is being recorded and streaming live on our YouTube channel, which Karen has displayed on the chat screen at youtube.com/user/CHCRPA. As part of the executive order compliance, we have to post all our meeting materials online prior to the meeting, which we have done at our website. And we need to do roll calls both for establishing the quorum and for any action items considered by the commission.
Thanks, John. Can you conduct that roll call?
Yes, sir. Commissioners, what I'll be doing similar to what I did last month, or last week, I should say, is I'll be just calling your last name to establish attendance and for every action item. So I'll start with Bailey.
Here.
Ledford.
Here.
Palmer.
Here.
Hyatt.
Here.
Barone.
Here.
Farmer.
Here.
Wilson. Wilson. Lehman.
Here.
Bankston.
Here.
Coker. Coker. Matthews.
Here.
Maybe.
Here.
Parks. Parks. Payne.
Here.
Thank you, sir. And Collier.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum, Chair.
For the purpose of today's meeting, thank you all for being here. And Karen, I'm guessing we have everybody that was in the waiting room is actually in the meeting now. Is that right?
Yes, Mr. Chair, and we had, I brought in an additional planning commissioner, Barry Payne, and I'm sorry I missed him on the roll call, but yes, we have 11 attendees in the meeting, and so all the planning commissioners that I'm aware of should be in at this point.
Thank you. So the purpose of today's meeting is to consider the adoption of the Area 3 plan. This is an adoption hearing. We don't want to give members of the public an opportunity. I'm sorry. We do want to give members of the public an opportunity to speak before we vote. There are a number of proposed modifications to the original draft for today. So Karen, I'll turn it over to you. And if you could pull up the agenda for today's meeting, we'll go over that. And let's see here.
Chair, I'd be happy to jump in real quick if you like.
Sure.
So we have the agenda shown before the screen. As our chair indicated, we'll be receiving some public comments. But before we do that, the staff will give an overview of the plan itself and some of the proposed modifications. So you have that for context. It'll be a short presentation, about 7 minutes, and then we will open the meeting for public comments. There are some written comments, which I'll be reading prior to some verbal comments from those who have registered to speak at today's meeting. So we'll do that. And then after we've heard from public comments, we'll turn over to the Planning Commission to deliberate on the plan and the proposed modifications. And then our wrap up will be just kind of let folks know what the next steps are. So thank you, Chair.
All right. Thank you, John. Now, did you mention that we had 20 minutes for the public comments?
I did not. Appreciate that clarification. Yes. That's
Okay.
20 minutes,
So
yes.
hopefully by the time we get there, we'll have a pretty good sense of the number of people that want to speak. And I guess, Karen, do we know how many people wish to speak now and on, or do we have any sense of how many people we want to have speak?
Sure, and Mr. Chair, you might have to confirm Karen Rennick or Karen Hunt, but I'll take this one. We did have 2 people who signed up in advance to speak, Paula Wilson and Jerry Price. And we just chatted out to attendees if they'd like to speak to contact us via the chat box, but that might take a few minutes to get any responses there. But so as of right now, just the 2.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Hunt, did you want to display the signed up speakers?
It's just those 2 that Karen just mentioned.
Okay, thank you. All right. Well, can we get started?
Sure. Oh, sorry, a little delay here. Okay. All right. Before we review the list of proposed modifications, we wanted to take just a minute to look at the purpose of area plans. Some of you have seen this list on our website or in other plans before, but these are some of the primary things that plans do. Early on in the area plan process, community members are asked to identify areas and qualities that are important to them. In the historic River to Ridge area, those included some of the core single family neighborhoods that they wanted to see preserved as such. Second, the plan then takes that community input. It lays out a roadmap or a vision of what kind of and where new development should go to support that vision. Next, it also helps align public investments with new private development. As you know, with limited budgets, the plans help the city government prioritize where new sidewalks, bike lanes, and other public improvements will be added. In the case of the historic River to Ridge plan, it recommends, for instance, new higher intensity development around centers and along some corridors to support transit investments. And fourth, each month, as this planning commission and the city council make rezoning decisions, those bodies can also refer to those plans. Just a couple highlights of some of the policies that came out of the historic River to Ridge plan. First of all, it protects single family areas, but does propose to add some accessory dwelling units in those areas. It also promotes other housing options in other areas when we get into more larger multifamily developments or missing middle type housing. The plan establishes specific locations for commercial centers. It aligns the transformation of corridors such as Macaulay, East 3rd, Main Street, and Dodds Avenue with transit, as I just said previously. Again, it also helps prioritize city capital investments in those centers and along those corridors. And it also maintains the existing industrial areas and promotes the addition of some neighborhood-friendly industrial, sort of non-nuisance or clean industries in certain areas. Okay, so jump into the proposed modifications. There are 9 of them. I'm going to give a brief overview of each one, but the planning commissioner should have received a full list in their packet. The same full list has also been available on the RPA's website for the public to review. You'll notice that we have numbered each one, so if you have any questions about them later, or if you want to, you can refer to those numbers in your motion. Do note, when we come to those, numbers 5 and 6 have 2 alternates. And I believe, Mr. Chair, you wanted to hold questions until the end, just to save time, is that correct? I think so.
That's
okay.
good. Yes.
Right. Okay. So modification number 1. The entire text that you see in your handout would be added to section 10.6 of the area plan. That section is measuring progress and plan updates. Basically, it says that area plans, excuse me, will sunset after 8 years. And at that time, new plans or major updates will be adopted with an option to extend that a little bit if needed. However, minor amendments could be made within 2 to 3 years of plan adoption if zoning changes or new development change the character of an area. So that is modification number 1. Okay, modification number 2. This proposed change falls in section 4.5 of the plan. After the draft plan was posted for public review, CARTA notified us that they were making some changes to Route 10C by moving a portion of it to Dodson Avenue, which actually aligns better with the place types. So staff would like to add that as a modification. So that's number 2. Modification number 3. This modification proposes to delete the conservation-based residential place type completely, and of course, delete it from the map as well. Instead, in section 4.6, we would just mention conservation subdivisions as one of several tools that could be used, and that's modification 4. So for number 4, under best practices in section 4.6, we would add a description of conservation subdivision design as one of tools for developing areas that might include sensitive natural resources. Okay, modification number 5. Again, this is one that has 2 alternates. Alternate A renames the reserve overlay to natural resources overlay, and it adds language to communicate the need for a balance between development and conservation in those areas. Now, keep in mind, this is not an actual place type. It's an overlay that just identifies the location of slopes and floodplains. So there was always an underlying place type there. Alternate B was something that was added at the April 23rd meeting. In this case, instead of changing the name to natural resources overlay, it removes the natural resources overlay completely. So that's number 5, alternate A and B. Okay, modification number 6 also has 2 alternates. Alternate A adds language to section 7.2 about how place types will be used as a general guide for rezoning requests and for creating new zones. It also says that place types provide some transition from higher intensity uses along the corridors and in the centers to lower intensity development in the core single family neighborhoods. Alternate B adds a statement to alternate A about not using the place types when evaluating site plans. Okay, modification 7. The staff inadvertently omitted transit in the list of criteria that would be used to consider secondary uses in the place types. Many of these secondary uses are higher density uses that are intended to support transit. So this modification just adds another bullet that says proximity to transit to that list of criteria. Modification number 8, based on previous feedback from the Planning Commission, the staff has completely rewritten and reformatted all of the place type descriptions in section 7.4. For instance, we changed some of the more prescriptive language to be more general. We deleted some numerical references, except where they were really needed to differentiate between 2 different place types, such as the urban residential and mixed residential. And we completely removed some other elements, such as signage from that. So that is number 8. And finally, number 9. Number 9 replaces the place types map that was dated February 2020 on our website with a revised map that includes 3 basic changes. The first one is, again, that deletion of the conservation-based residential and instead reassigning other place types to those properties. The second thing it does is increases the depth of the urban corridor and the mixed use corridor in some places. And that's to accommodate larger mixed use or multifamily development along those corridors so they can support transit. And thirdly, it adds some more mixed residential along those same corridors and around some centers, again, to support transit. So those are the 9 modifications, and I will turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you, Karen. Before we hear from any of the public that wants to comment on these plan changes, is there any question or discussion that we'd like to have as a commission on these before we hear from the public?
Mr. Chair, if you don't mind,
Councilman Ledford.
thank you, sir. Two of them, I would like to get some clarification or from, believe Mr. Bridger on the 5A alternate and the 6A. I'd like to hear a little bit more of the reasoning staff has for that.
I think actually those were proposed by Commissioner Farmer. He may give some as far as kind of a thought behind those alternatives. So you might want to. Do you want to hear from him first?
Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah, that would be great. And then I definitely want to hear your response.
Sure.
Mr. Farmer.
Thank you. Show on. I had a question about these as well. I put forth in the last meeting, and I don't recall giving any alternates when I put forward. What I said was, and I still feel very strongly this way, the city is going forward right now in defining what natural resources are, and regarding steep slopes, floodplains, natural resources. I feel like we would be making a mistake in putting an overlay in at this time, and that we would leave this out with almost having an asterisk next to it, that when we complete this process that we put this in. So my question was going to, my question also was going to be, where did the alternatives come from? Because I thought I was pretty clear in our last public meeting.
I could respond. I think what, as I understand it, this, I guess the alternate me, the A5 would be just, it would be there. I guess if you're saying, Commissioner, that you would take it, it would still be taking it out because either you to move forward with 5, which is a staff version with the overlay, because you're making a recommendation to City Council, or it would be, you could add additional note if you wanted as part of alternate B, saying, hey, with the intent of it being added after City Council reviews the natural resources report. If you want to add, if you want to add a clarification of the thought that it's kind of like a temporary takeout that we put back in later.
No, I again, maybe I'm just not being clear. I thought I was really clear that let's take it out, and then when we define it, we can come back and put it in, and then now I see options that are not that, or at least option A is not that. So my intent is that we leave it out until we define what natural resources are, and not leave it up to this plan or an overlay to do that, because we're right in the middle of that process.
May I jump in, John, just to clarify? Alternate A was Mr. Farmer, was the original proposal, which was to rename the reserve overlay to natural resources overlay, but it's still in there on the map. It's just renamed something different. Alternate B is what you suggested, which was to just take it out, not have it in there at all, if that helps.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay.
And Councilman,
Thank you.
you also
No,
asked about
thank you.
6 and the 2 alternates there as well, right?
John, you're muted.
Yes, that's correct. And I think if you, so if you wanted to, Commissioner Farmer sponsored that one as well. So if you're asking for some clarification from him on that one, is that what you wanted to kind of get some, is that correct?
Yes.
Can you repeat the question, please, Ethan?
Well, I think what Councilman Ledford was wanting is clarification from you on what your intent was on these alternatives. I guess what's coming to light is that maybe it would be helpful if you explained what you were looking for when you proposed an alternate to 6.
Are we off of 5 now?
We are.
Okay, can you scroll up to 6, please, Karen?
There you go.
Sorry, I forgot my packet is sitting on my home counter. So,
I can get a quick highlight on that. Jason, you want to add to it?
go ahead, because
Yeah,
this
I
is
think-
not what I remember. Go ahead.
But I think what Commissioner Farmer was looking at doing here was just clarifying. There's one paragraph in the clarification of the use of place types that talked about site related conditions. And I think what Commissioner Farmer added as a alternate was for that particular paragraph, essentially, let me get to my notes. Just give me 1 second. To add a sentence that says place types will only be used to define a zone and will not be considered in evaluating a site plan or any site related conditions. And Commissioner, I think what I understand you thinking there was, when you say site related conditions, you mean conditions that relate to a particular site plan.
Yeah, and I'm looking at my notes from our previous meeting, and that's exactly word for word my note. Place types only defining a zone not to be considered in evaluating a site plan or site conditions. And what I explained the last time we talked is that a place type is an overlay and a guideline. And in other words, if there was a site and let's say it had some kind of site related condition like a stream running through it or a historic stand of trees or something like that, none of those things would be defined in a place type. That place type is an overlay that says in general this plan meets these place types, and we shouldn't be looking at individual site conditions in defining a place type. That's the business of the Planning Commission and the City Council if those things change. Does that make sense?
I was waiting for Ledford to respond.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the clarification, and it does actually make a lot of sense. So I appreciate the conversation on those two alternates.
Yeah, I want to be clear that what I'm trying to do in these modifications is just pull out individual site related conditions, and a place type is a broad overlay, and a particular site plan or any of those conditions just shouldn't be evaluated when we're defining whether a place type is correct or not. That's it.
So I have a question, John. Does that make if without this alternate version, does that put quite a bit of restriction to?
What I would say from a staff perspective, I would just have, I guess, two remarks on that particular element. I agree that we need to be focused more on what I call basic nuisance related conditions and not get into the specifics of place type related character oriented condition. And the reason for that is I think we need to fix that in our zoning code. I think part of the reason that we're here and we still got a code that's way out of date is because we've been continuing to essentially create ordinances with every case, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of passing the buck, so to speak, to actually fixing our zoning code. So I do agree with Mr. Farmer on the idea of, hey, let's minimize the use of specific conditions on a site plan with, I would say, with two caveats. One, clearly we still need to continue to address basic nuisance related elements like land uses, hours of operation, things that create what I call public safety oriented impacts. I think the other is, of course, when you get a PUD by nature has a site plan attached to it. So there's going to be some level of staff comments on a PUD. The third comment I would say, and I would like to hear Jason respond to this. I think we would still want to look at existing site conditions in terms of what I mean by that is, if you all remember that East Braintree case where we had a chert pit and the area, this is the area 12 plan, it recommended suburban residential, but there's a chert pit there. And I think the conversation was, well, because there's a chert pit, it's probably not feasible for residential. So right. I'm just curious about Mr. Farmer's thoughts on that as far as understanding, I guess, some of the existing constraints on the property as it relates to land use. I'll stop there.
Again, and not to repeat myself, but to me, that is, those are the exception cases that fall into planning commission and city council, and not the place for a plan and an overlay. And John, I had not thought about nuisance related elements. I do agree to that, and I'd be happy to make that change. But no, and I thought about, and I think you and I even talked about that chirp pit at the time. And to me, that's the exception. And when we're looking at a plan, it should be looking at these plans and place types. It needs to be from more of a 10,000 foot view and not individual cases. And that's kind of what I'm trying to avoid here.
I do have one other follow-up with permission on the other alternative, just so you know where staff's coming from on that one, as y'all deliberate as a commission whenever you're ready.
All right, so are there any other questions?
Yeah,
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
Who have we got? We've got Mr. Bailey and then Mr. Matthews.
Yes.
I think I can be brief. I appreciate what Mr. Farmer is trying to do. I think, and I will say that number one, and number two, I'm prepared to vote to move this forward. I think these plans are intended to take 6 months. This one has taken, I think, 3 times that. I think we should move forward. So in that respect, I'll go with what my colleagues want, but I strongly prefer alternate A. And the reason for it, and I think that's what maybe is being discussed here, is, again, I appreciate what Mr. Farmer is trying to do. I think to create place types which are very valuable and then restrict staff from being able to use them so explicitly seems to be removing some flexibility. That's not to say I disagree with any of the comments that were just made. I just think it's a little bit too heavy-handed, and I think all these things can be accomplished with the alternate A as written by staff. But as I said, I'm prepared to approve this plan regardless, but I strongly prefer alternate A in this case.
Can I just add real quick? I'm not trying to slow this down at all. I 100% am with you, Blythe. I feel strongly about alternate B on 5 and 6, but no, this plan, we need to move this thing forward 100%, and I'm not trying to slow it down at all. It's our first city plan, and I do feel some responsibility to make sure that we get it right, as we can move these things quicker in the future.
Mr. Matthews.
Yes, back to modification 5. And I've been for quite some time wanted the definition of the floodplains changed or made appropriate. So as I understand it, that definition is up to council, and council has not done that yet. Is that correct?
So you want me to answer that, John?
Sure, being the city councilman.
So we are in my committee. We are in the process. We have taken a pause, if you will, for COVID. We've taken a pause for the tornadoes in my district. We're going to resume the conversations in June, and we have some proposed items that we are considering. As far as your specific question about defining floodplains, most of the conversation, Commissioner Matthews, is really right now is oriented towards steep slopes and defining what steep slopes are. There has been a couple of numbers thrown out there. We have the state numbers. We have a automatic trigger number through LDO, which is a slight variation of about 1.5 off, a 1.5% off. And then looking at methods of construction or standards that help increase and protect stormwater runoff. So I think what you'll see in this first round from council is more focused in the steep slopes than it is specifically into the floodplains, although there are some elements of floodplains being considered, but we will be picking that conversation back up. So it does seem actually kind of prudent to not put in something, as Commissioner Farmer has suggested, that locks us down to something that really hasn't come to fruition yet.
Oh, yeah, that's excellent. In other words, can we change the wording to that to just not include floodplain at this point?
I think it's certainly up for debate between the commission, and we'll be looking at this probably, I'm guessing at council August, John, would be the absolute earliest, is what I'm guessing. So, I mean, at this point, definitely up for debate and in this body, and this is a place to talk about it.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Pam, could you pull up 5? The entire language that we're looking at and not just the change.
Mr. Chair, I had a comment when it's appropriate.
Mr. Palmer?
I wanted a clarification, and I wanted to express a concern on number 5. Our first question is, when we start talking about this overlay, we often go immediately to the floodplain conversation. I understand that City Council is coming up with something to handle that, but my understanding is that's potentially a little more technical on how we do things. And I absolutely understand Commissioner Farmer's reasoning that we don't need to dive down into that sort of thing when we're talking about an area plan and just the big picture type items. My concern is, when I see something like resource overlay, I immediately start thinking about things that the community values as well, like view shed, potential public amenity, future trails and things like that I think should probably be part of the conversation that we have every time that we look at a property. That's not necessarily the technical aspects of floodplains, and maybe not even necessarily steep slopes, but I do think that considering the value added of certain sites should be part of our conversation. And maybe in light of the fact that we don't have anything in place, that my sort of feeling would be we keep something in place till we do have something in place. And to your point, Mr. Farmer, we can take it out when it's in place rather than try to remember to put it back in. So that's my thoughts on the matter.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer. Was there any more discussion on that? And I believe Pam had asked in the chat if it'd be helpful to pull up the PDF full language of these modifications being proposed. And both Jason and I said that we thought it would be helpful.
Yes, and Karen would be the one to be able to present that. I think she has it queued up.
Can you see it on your screen now?
Yes.
It says modification number 5 and alternate, and then below that is modification number 6. So I can scroll down to that if you'd like.
Please.
For what it's worth, Karen, all I can see is a bunch of PDFs when you haven't opened anything. It looks like your screen may be frozen.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing too.
So, chairs, as they're pulling that up, I'm assuming you want to kind of just clarify this before we transition to public comments. Is that what you're thinking?
Yes.
Can you see that now?
We can.
Okay.
Karen, is that the just the summary list, or is that the full text?
That's the full text.
Okay.
You'll need to scroll down, Karen, I think, if to show the full version of what there's.
Well, this is number 6. That's all of number 5. And number 6 is this one.
Okay.
And for everybody, I guess, review that when we're talking about 6, I think where Jason's alternative has come in play is that second paragraph. it says in addition, existing
Mhm,
site
okay.
conditions. He would be, I think if you scroll down to Jason's proposed substitute paragraph,
Mhm.
it would be that paragraph right there would go in place of that.
All right. Any other questions or comments before we open it up to hear from the public on these?
Mr. Chairman, I think I'll echo what Mr. Palmer said and repeat, and also go back and say I wasn't trying to suggest that anybody was slowing down the process, more that I'm happy with either of these if it means that this gets approved. But I'll make the same comment about 5. I understand the comments, and I think Mr. Palmer used the term technical, I would term regulatory. The way I see the staff version is as an overlay. It establishes just the language of natural resource overlay. I think taking it out entirely takes away a strong sort of basis of the work. I don't think that having it in there as the staff has proposed it makes it overly regulatory or in any way backs us into being in an inappropriate situation. And I think it's good information, and there are natural resources that need to be acknowledged at the planning level. And I would argue that that can and probably should inform any regulation that's considered later on down the line. So again, I'm happy to move forward with this plan, regardless of which alternates we choose for 5 or 6, but I prefer the staff version of 5 rather than the alternate version.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey.
Can I add one quick comment to that? And I'll be done, I promise. You know, in every case we hear right now, we also get that natural resources note as well from staff. I mean, it's something we're already, I think in a lot of cases we're already getting anyway. And I know it's time to move on.
All right. Anything else? All right, Ms. Rennick, we've got some folks that want to speak.
Yes, Mr. Chair, and we did not have anyone type in the chat box that they wanted to speak. We did test that to make sure it was working. I have 2 people signed up in advance, Jerry Price and Paula Wilson. I do see Jerry Price in the attendee list, and in just a moment I will be unmuting to allow the person to speak. Just asking if Paula Wilson is part of the attendees, if she could raise her virtual hand in Zoom or chat to me or put in the chat box that I'm here, then I'll be able to identify Miss Wilson. But as of right now, I don't see her in the attendee list. So Mr. Chair, I am going to unmute Jerry Price and allow Jerry to talk. And Jerry, you are should be able to speak.
Okay, just before we do that, Jerry, thank you for being on this call. Just in light of the fact that there may be some other folks that want to speak, and we might find that out over the next few minutes. I'd like for, I'll limit the time of these first 2 speakers to 5 minutes per speaker. And if we have extra time after that, I don't mind coming back and revisiting that. But I note the time is 11:41. And I'll jump in and interrupt if need be, but we'll go ahead and turn it over. Thank you.
Okay, you ready? Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. First of all, I want to apologize for getting involved in this Area 3 so late. I tried to avoid it, but unfortunately I kind of was thrown into it with a rezoning modification request. I would like to modify a place type on the west side of East 14th from Central to Top Street, which is now classified in this plan under mixed residential. And I would like for it to be a true mixed use. I have been reading through this plan this last week. It's 280 pages. I'm not exactly sure what a true mixed use or a mixed residential is. I have several letters that I submitted this morning. I've just started garnering support I don't think that the people on that block understand what that is, that they're not going to be allowed to have businesses anymore, or that RPA won't support that. I'm not saying it can't be done, but those specific blocks are heavy manufacturing, commercial. They're right off of Main Street, and I really don't think it's a conducive transition for the existing property owners to be limited to basically mixed residential and whatever RPA considers neighborhood serving. I know that you've noted in your documents that that's like a pub or etc. Well, I think a lot of people would consider that a nuisance. I don't, but I think if you want to have like an engineering firm or an architecture firm there, that's not considered a nuisance. That's a business. And so I think there's very good reason for those two specific blocks to be modified to a more variable use, because I would like the support of RPA, and I think people in the future would like going up with RPA versus against them. That's it.
All right, thank you. And then we had one other person.
Mr. Chair, I don't see that Paula Wilson is an attendee based on the email and phone number provided, and no one raised their hand, virtual hand, to speak or put in the chat box. So I believe we don't have anyone else in the meeting who wishes to speak.
All right. So in light of those comments, John, do you have any suggestions on how we handle that?
You can, as a commission, if you want, as part of your, again, when you deliberate on modifications, you can make a recommendation. I think probably helpful, I think before you do that, we could drill down to that particular block. I think we've got Eric Matrevers who could show you that block in question. And if you want to, you can get staff's feedback on that. And then you all can, I think that I would say the challenge of that block, I think the speaker did speak correctly, on the across the street is more of an industrial, non-residential. But that block itself still has some single family structures on it. And I can explain more detail of staff's thoughts on that. But what I would suggest, maybe once we get through the, I do have some public comments we received. I have to go through just for the record. And then once you guys get to deliberating on modifications, we can pull that particular block up and explain to you what was going on there.
I think that'd be helpful. Do you want to go over the other public comments?
Yeah, just to kind of get that done, so we have that for the record. I'll try to go as fast as I have basically 4 emails to read. We received 2 from Billy Reynolds. He is the associate with Glenwood Neighborhood. I believe he's the Neighborhood Association president. Is that right, Karen Hunt? Your mic is off, Karen.
Yes,
He
I
is the
believe he is.
neighborhood president.
Okay, thank you. Just clarifying that. So this email submitted. I do need to share my screen with you. Sorry, guys. Oh, Karen, can you let me, Rennick, can you let me share my screen?
Yes, hold on one moment.
Might be easy as I'm reading through it. You can kind of see what I'm reading. Tell me when you're ready.
You should be able to share a screen now.
Okay, thank you. Okay, can you all see my screen?
Yes.
I'll maximize it so y'all. Okay, let me minimize that. So this is from Billy Reynolds on April 21st. Please include the following comments to the Planning Commission members on April 23rd. I just again want to caution everyone surrounding East Chattanooga about continuing to welcome manufacturing to East Chattanooga. Manufacturing is being pushed away from the more developed and more desirable parts of town, i.e. the riverfront. It is a nuisance and it doesn't make sense to have it within city limits. Yet 21 acres of the former Harriet Tubman site is in Avondale recently has been given to a Nippon plant for manufacturing. The other 13 acres and the site in Avondale is slated for more manufacturing and more manufacturing support services. None of the input received through the 850 Area 3 Community Choice surveys indicate that anyone wants to see manufacturing in East Chattanooga. In fact, the word manufacturing can be found in the RPA's entire Community Choices Survey results document. Here we are, devoting dozens of East Chattanooga acres to manufacturing activity that East Chattanooga hasn't asked for and doesn't want. Nobody wants manufacturing around their homes. Manufacturing buildings are uninviting steel giants, and they come with many unpleasant sights, sounds, smells, etc. East Chattanooga's wanted jobs, but jobs can come from parks, shops, restaurants, apartments, and many other place types that residents would also get direct out of. I guess it'd be a benefit. And 29 acres given to Nippon is the only going to generate 150 jobs. I imagine a small percentage of the jobs will be given to East Chattanooga residents, and most of those 150 jobs instead will be given to people who live in communities other than East Chattanooga. Manufacturing offers less utility to East Chattanooga residents than any other place type. And I think you list those restaurants, the other type of uses that would be most directly used by residents. Manufacturing serves the city much more than it serves East Chattanoogans. The city has given dozens of precious downtown acres to the place type that offers the least services to restaurants, to residents, manufacturing. Please, you can kind of get his point there. And he had a follow-up email. This is at 3:44 p.m. Dear Area 3 Planning Commission, thanks again for all your work in the planning and development of Area 3. Just want to continue cautioning the Planning Commission about the extent to which it welcomes manufacturing within and around our historic Area 3 neighborhoods, and asking it to take great care to employ good buffers wherever it welcomes manufacturing. You can see similar comments to Nippon Plant. And I personally hate to see so many downtown acres being devoted to an activity that offers zero direct use to 99.9% of neighboring residents, an activity that none of the respondents in Area 3 specifically requested. Residents have asked for jobs and want jobs, and jobs that can come from many place types, but no one has asked for manufacturing in and around our neighborhoods. Okay. This came from Janice Gooden, the president of Riverside Area Community Club. This is in the area just off of Amnicola Highway, between that and the railroad viaduct. She is a member of our advisory committee. She says, I've been involved in the process of the development of this area plan since the public meeting held at Carver Recreation Center in June 2018. I would like to commend Pam Glazer, Karen Hunt, and other staff for all the hard work that has gone to the development of this plan. I am in agreement overall with the recommendations and feel it should be adopted. I would like to make a few comments and highlight a few areas in the plan that I support. A major concern of some residents is the possibility of gentrification as new development takes place. There's a general distrust with the planning processes, with the opinion that those decisions have already been made. One of my goals is to focus on community engagement with the hope of more resident participation in community affairs. I think she's just highlighting some of the things that I guess she liked here. Housing policies retain existing single-family character of core neighborhoods, support of multifamily missing middle housing if it is located along commercial corridors or at key intersections. She noted the walkable retail centers and centers and corridors, and the transportation infrastructure policies. Some bus frequencies are too long for daily work commute, and bus shelters and sidewalks are lacking in some areas. Most bike lanes are not protected lanes with a physical barrier between them and the cars, discouraging the casual cyclist from using that mode of transportation. So those are some of the things she highlighted in the plan. And then looks like she just copied some other elements of the plan. There's a need for more safety measures, pedestrians, walkability at both locations listed above, Riverside Drive. There's a need for traffic calming and improved pedestrian crossings. There's a need for improvement of safety measures for pedestrians and cyclists who try to navigate the viaduct bridge from Riverside Drive to Holtz Call Avenue. And just kind of highlight the next step section of the plan. Very valuable information is provided. I can appreciate the tools indicated and the idea of partnerships. I realize that this plan only represents recommendations. If approved, I welcome the opportunity to partner with others to make the implementation of this plan a reality. Let's see, and this is from Mary Moten. Please provide the following comments regarding the River Ridge plan to the Planning Commission. Chattanooga needs more affordable housing. What are the plans to address this issue? And see, from Jay Martin. This is regarding East 14th Street as a supporting neighboring property in the past present. We support the rezoning. Okay, here also press concern of Area 3 proposing limitations for this side of East 14th Street. I think this applies to the comments you heard a few minutes ago from the speaker. From Central Avenue to Top Street for residential only, mixed use may be more appropriate with existing adjacent large manufacturing, urban UCG, I guess we should say UGC, commercial and various residential types. That's from Jay Martin. Let's see. This is from Tom Scholl of Chattanooga Buller at 1011 East Bank Street. My name is Tom Scholl, and I'm the president CEO of Chattanooga Buller and Tank, located East 1011 East Main Street. And I've recently been made aware of the Tri-Electric is trying to attempt to rezone their property at 1006 East 14th Street, which backs up to the Main Street offices. It is my understanding, again, this is that same block we're talking about here, that Tri has made this request not to sell the property to a developer, but to expand their current business and operations. This both increases our local workforce and boosts our economy. Chattanooga Boulevard Tank is in a similar situation, and we have been in business in Main Street for many years. I would like to express that we at Chattanooga Boulevard Tank support Triad and their rezone request. Again, I've been aware that the upcoming Area 3 Rivers Ridge would limit both Triad and Chattanooga Boulevard Tank ability for future expansion to our East 14th Street property. So we'll get to that in a minute after we go through all this. We have owned and maintained those lots for many years, and to classify those blocks for future residential development only, referring to that mixed residential designation, seems illogical and not in keeping with this mixed-use neighborhood. I am not in support of taking away our option to expand property adjacent to our offices, which were acquired possibly for that very purpose. I have been informed that Triad has offered concessions to the city for its proposed new buildings, such as mixed use with some residential, limit height and mass, and limit uses allowed. These self-imposed conditions would seem appropriate and proper for the current adjacent mix of commercial, manufacturing, residential, and allow for continued diversification. Thank you. And the last one, this is from Chris Henniger, Henniger Homes. This letter is taken to show my support of the proposed zoning case at 2020-0051 at 1006 East 14th Street, allowing rezone from R3 to mixed use. Again, that's that same block. It is my understanding that the applicant has offered restrictions and allowances, such as height restriction, added street facing residential component, and usage limitations as part of its UG rezone conditions. I would also say that I'm not in support of East 14th Street from Central to Top Main Street adjacent parcels to be categorized as residential only in the upcoming River to Ridge plan. I do want to say on this, as we get into it, I think we need to clarify what mixed residential mean, because it does actually support some other non-residential uses, but we'll clarify that in a minute. I am in support of mixed use on both sides of this block. East 14th is directly off a major urban corridor in addition to East 4th Street. Existing varied mixed use conditions which range vastly in size and occupancy type, therefore mandating continued type place as mixed use. So that's a mouthful, but I got through all of it. Thank you, Chair.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Bridger. Any questions or comment? Have we got any more public comment, Ms. Rennick?
I do have a hand raised. If that hand is for Paula Wilson, I can't unmute that person, but I would ask the Justin that has their hand raised as an attendee to confirm if they are Paula Wilson. But otherwise, no one has provided any additional information, and the hand just went down. So no, I don't believe we have anyone else who would like to speak, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Do we know why Justin had his hand raised?
I'm guessing it's a staff member, our staff member, Justin. He decided that he wasn't speaking.
Got it. Okay. All right. Well, John, can we, Ms. Price had brought up the question about that particular block. Can we pull that map up and
Sure.
do that real quick?
Need to let Karen Rennick, if you let Eric Matrevor share his screen and just zoom into that block.
He should have the ability, John, and he did ask if he could get an address for the area in question.
It's 1400 block of, let me pull up my email,
I think it's 1006 East 14th Street.
yeah, 1006 East 14th. Thank you, Karen.
Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can see it. Thank you, Eric.
Okay. Is this the area in question we were talking about? This section
Yes,
here
that block
behind
right there.
Okay.
Between top, you see top to the right. Can you zoom a little further, Justin, or Eric, so we can kind of get it? Yeah, there you go. Thank you. I may give a couple just opening comments, and then Ethan, feel free to drive it from there. This is a block. It's right, there is some commercial non-res across the street. We've seen, as you know, on the block just west of here, several rezoning requests to UGC for the purposes of doing, I would call like townhouse type development, primarily residential. I'm not aware of any commercial, non-residential components on that side. Just to be clear, mixed residential, it does allow commercial, but the idea is it's accessory to, it's not the primary use. So mixed residential, the theme there would be, from a policy perspective, is predominantly residential. You could have offices as a secondary use. You can have residential, some commercial as a secondary use, but it has to be what called residential friendly, low impact. So that's what that would mean for that block. If you're looking at making that whole thing urban commercial, or that corridor was that dark blue to the south, that would mean basically allowing any mix of residential or commercial. So you could have just a more intensive kind of a commercial development without any particular residential component. Is that a good clarification, Karen Hunt?
Yes, it would also allow larger, like probably taller buildings. You could have offices and things in mixed residential, but again, like you said, it's more of a secondary type use.
Trevor, can Trevor show us exactly where we're talking about? Where, what
Eric?
block are we referring to exactly?
Yeah, I'm not certain. What was the street address of the lot?
See,
It,
go to top, see the word top,
Yes.
just to the left of top, that whole block that's orange.
And so the thought there would be that that should be blue. Is that right?
Well, the staff is recommending orange, which would be mixed residential. I think, as I understand it, and you basically, your options would be orange, or if you're trying to intensify to where we think like you do a UGC, but no conditions, right? Then that whole thing will be blue.
Yeah.
another option would be the industrial hybrid, the light
Or the
purple.
industrial hybrid, yeah.
Can I raise a concern with making plan changes at this point? You know, this map has been out for quite some time. There are obviously houses on the block of 14th that we're talking about. I'm sure there are residents on that block who have seen this map and probably thought, okay, staff is recommending residential. If there was a rezoning application to do something other than residential, there would be all sorts of public notice that there was going to be a change. I feel like, I mean, just my personal opinion on it, it's a little late in the hour to make map changes, but I'm open to anybody else's input. I can't imagine that there's not some other people on the other side of this that might have an opinion other than what we've heard today. I mean, this map's been out for a while, right, John?
Yes.
And it's always been orange, right?
It hasn't changed to my knowledge.
And in the last hour to change the color of that, just without having heard from, you know, all the stakeholders in that area, including the people who live in those houses, seems like not something we would normally do.
That's correct.
Without there being proper public notice of a change like that. And correct me if I'm wrong, the other changes to the plan, all the modifications that were proposed today, there was public notice given that we were considering all the other modifications to Area 3, right?
That is correct, yes.
And
We
so-
both email, blast, and post on our website.
Okay, and so today, any modifications that we make to the plan, currently there has been public notice given, with this being an exception, that if we were to make any changes to the plan outside of the modifications, there wouldn't have been public notice, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Hey, Chair, just one little nuance note, just as you are deliberating. I know you're getting ready to shift gears to kind of deliberating on the modifications. Just to be clear on the 6 alternate, that's deal with the site-related conditions. Correct me if I'm wrong, Commissioner Farmer. All you're doing in terms of changing the original motion is that one paragraph. So just we'll be clear, if you're voting on that 6 alternative, it's just modifying that one paragraph in the. So just be real clear. So when you're voting for that alternative, it's basically what staff had proposed with that one change to that paragraph.
Alternative 6B is my language that you and I both confirmed earlier, is changing that paragraph. That's correct.
I was just making that clarity, Mr. Collier, so that when you vote on it, it's not like you're just adopting that paragraph. It's 6A with that paragraph change.
Okay. All right. So what I'd like to do is take the Planning Commission through the alternate. What I'd like for us to do is first move on the alternates for both 5 and 6. And then if we can do that, then we can do, and remember, we have to have a roll call vote. Then we can do all the other plan modifications at once, unless there's some sort of concern. In that case, we could pull them out. So we'd have one, hopefully I'll open the floor for discussion on 5. We would entertain a motion on 5 on either alternate A or B. Then we would move to 6, having selected alternate A or B. And then I would entertain a motion on all modifications, including 5 and 6. with either alternate A or B on either 5 or 6, if that makes sense. So 3 motions for us to move through. So with that being said, and also one other clarification, Mr. Farmer has presented 5 alternate B and 6 alternate B. Staff has come back with 6A and 5A. We are the planning commission and we can do whatever we want to do. So I just want to clarify that these are the options that are typed out in front of us, but we are not limited in any way, shape, or form on any of these. So it is completely open for discussion. With that being said, I'd like to open the floor for discussion on 5A or B or an alternate C, if anybody wants to propose that.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to move that we accept alternate B on modification 5.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'll second that.
We have a motion from Mr. Matthews to approve alternate B. And was that Mr. Maybe?
It was, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't know you were on the call. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, just to be clear, we're about to vote on that motion. If it passes, that means that modification 5B be included in all 9 of the modifications that we would then presumably make a motion on as a whole. Is that the way you see it?
Unless you want to do it, it doesn't have to be that way, but that's the way I saw it. But I can understand where you've said already that you're not in support of B, and so I don't want to put all the modifications. Maybe we'll just rule on these 5 and 6 separately. Does that work?
I'm fine with the way you had intended it.
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure I was clear on it.
What you said is what I had intended. Okay. All right. Any other discussion on the motion and second that we have for alternate B? All right. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye, and we'll do this via roll call vote.
Bailey,
No.
Ledford,
Yes.
Palmer,
No.
Hyatt,
Yes.
Verone,
Yes.
Farmer,
Yes.
Wilson. I saw her on the call. Is she out? Okay, I'll go to the next name.
Velma texted and her internet connection's not stable, so she's been on and off, but right now she's not in the meeting.
Okay. Lehman,
Yes.
Bankston,
Yes.
Coker,
Yes.
Matthews,
Yes.
maybe.
Yes.
Parks, is Parks with us? And Payne.
Yes.
Okay, so that passes.
All right. Thank you. And on alternate 6, we have both alternate 6A and alternate 6B. What's the will of the commission?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we use modification 6B.
We do have a motion.
A second.
And
Is that Bankston?
from Mr. Matthews.
Yes.
Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Okay, we'll do it again here. Bailey,
No.
Ledford,
Yes.
Palmer,
No.
Hyatt?
Yes.
Verone,
Yes.
Farmer,
Yes.
Lehman.
Yes.
We'll go back up to Wilson's still not in, right, Karen?
I don't believe so, John.
Okay, I'm just making sure. Bankston,
Yes.
Coker,
Yes.
Matthews,
Yes.
maybe,
Yes.
and Payne.
Yes.
And Parks is absent, I'm confirming.
That's correct.
Okay, so that passes.
All right, thank you, everybody. All right, so we'll now take up those remaining modifications. These are modifications 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, and 9.
Mr. Chairman, would you entertain a motion to approve all the remaining modifications?
Please.
A second.
So moved.
So we have a motion and a second. Any
Motion by
discussion?
Farmer, second by Ledford.
I did. Blythe
Oh.
did.
Blythe Bailey. Okay, sorry. Go ahead, Chair.
Any discussion? All right, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Bailey,
Aye.
Ledford,
Yes.
Palmer,
Yes.
Hyatt,
Yes.
Barone,
Yes.
Farmer,
Yes.
Lehman,
Yes.
Bankston,
Yes.
Coker,
Yes.
Matthews,
Aye.
maybe,
Yes.
Payne.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right. Mr. Bridger, we have modifications for 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, and 9, and we have alternate modifications for 5 and 6. We need to now pass the plan as well, right?
That's correct. This will go before City Council.
Mhm.
There's a minimum 30-day window by state law that you have to advertise. So I would anticipate, of course, I need to coordinate with Councilman Ledford and the councils. They want to take items on the agenda, but I would assume that probably in July, early July. I know he mentioned August. I didn't know that was, but anyway, be that whatever it be, there would need to be a minimum 30-day window for advertising. And just again, to remind everybody on the audience, process-wise, once council takes this up, if there's any changes from what you recommended as a body, if council approves anything different, it would need to come back to please see for a confirmation vote.
All right, but we still need to take action on the entire Area 3 plan.
Well, you're actually, I'm assuming now, you tell me if I understand differently. What you just voted on was the plan with these adoptions to be recommended to council for their consideration. You, as I understand it, you've taken action on, now, if you want to, just to be real clear, we could do another vote saying that you are recommending council adoption of the plan with the modifications you just voted on.
I'll make that motion.
Yeah, I feel like that's what we need because I didn't understand that
okay, that's fine.
All we did was just modify the plan. We didn't recommend approval for the plan.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the plan with the modifications we previously approved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and it has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Bailey,
Aye.
Ledford,
Yes.
Palmer,
Yes.
Hyatt,
Yes.
Barone,
Yes.
Farmer,
Yes.
Wilson is still out. Lehman,
Yes.
Bankston,
Yes.
Coker,
Yes.
Matthews,
Aye.
maybe,
Aye.
Parks, and then Payne.
Yes.
Motion passes, sir.
All right, thank you. Motion carries. Well, thank you everybody for your time today. And thank you for staff for all the hard work put into it. And those of the public, I know some of them were on the phone today, but I know that there were countless hours put in by to pull this plan off. And I think this is really, really good and a step in the right direction. Before we jump off the phone or off this meeting altogether, John, this goes on to City Council. If they make any modifications, it comes back to us for confirmation. But even today, while we were discussing it, there was some conversation about how long this plan took from start to finish. I'm curious, how long did this plan take from start to just getting through Planning Commission?
I would say it's been 1.5 years.
Okay, and what What do we attribute that to?
Well, I would say on the front end, we had some turnover in staff. We had 3 different project leaders due to folks taking opportunities for advancement. I think we had a lot of turnover, and so that I think that impacted us. The other thing that set us back a little bit is we had a server. One of our servers crashed where we lost all of our GIS files. We had to literally reconstruct our analysis. That set us back. I think the other part, and kind of getting to Jason's comments, I think was the refinements to the place types, because as you all worked on kind of some comments and notes on that, we had some similar conversation internally as staff in terms of kind of how we refine those as they were being developed. So I think clearly we don't want to take that long on every plan, and it's one of the things that Karen's team has done, I think, to help expedite the process moving forward, is simplifying the meeting formats. We've basically done it, basically modified our process to where we don't have as many. I think what's caused a lot of organizational time was when you do a lot of those facilitated meetings, where you have a lot of facilitator volunteers and discussion tables. That takes a lot of time to set up, and we're trying to use more things that are simpler, like open houses and other things that still gives people opportunity to come by and see us and discuss, but there's not as much logistical complexity in executing. So they are aware that we need to make this a lot quicker, and that's what we're using as a new model for Area 11. I will say another big thing, post-COVID, public meetings will be different. We're going to have to use a different approach to public meetings. We're actually in the process of looking at acquiring a internet tool to allow folks to participate online. So we're going to have to, our public meetings are going to look different going forward. I hope that helps.
Yeah, that's great.
I got one question before we go. As a technically challenged individual, as you can tell, are we with the state opening up? Are we close? Is our next meeting going to be back to normal? Are we doing this? What's the future?
I would say at least the June PC, I think we would probably still do virtually. We have to figure out the problem is we still have that social distancing and meeting assemblies, groups of more than 5. I think that's the issue. If we conduct a meeting, as you know, planning commission meetings, you could have 50 or more people at, and that would violate that social gathering rule. So I think we would have to work through the logistics of how you handle the 5-foot separation and distance from folks. Rennick, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think the governor's order is through to allow virtual meetings is through the end of June. So we are using that as kind of our benchmark. It originally had been through the end of May. It was, or actually it was through last night. And when the governor extended the order, we did the virtual meeting for today. Since it's through the end of June, I think we're kind of using that to say the planning commission meeting and any other public meetings the RPA would normally hold would be virtual through the end of that governor's order.
So I think at least at that point, we're probably stuck in this mode at least through June, and then we'll try to see if we can do some transition planning for the July meeting. We just got to be mindful of, so per the governor's executive orders, those community gathering limits, and of course, still maintaining that social distancing. So that's something I know we've had some preliminary discussions with Brian and Karen about at least that 5-foot distance rule, how we're going to make that work. And what facility would be best. We're not sure if the county courthouse will be the best place to do that or the DRC.
Let's do it at the Roundhouse.
I'll see if I can book it. So those, just know that those are our challenges. So we just have to be always in compliance with the social gathering limit and that social distancing.
All right. Anything else before we adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Adjourn. I need that from Mr. Payne, actually.
I move to adjourn, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Second.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody.